Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday as I'm recording this. I am trying to keep up with the good pace that I have set myself as far as working through the backlog of stuff that people have sent me. This time I have a short adventure for low-level parties that's 5th edition, or 5th edition compatible. Let me pull it up. Let's get that image over there. There we go. It's by, let's see if I can pronounce this last name correctly, Neil Litherland and Brian Berg, published by Total Party Kill Games, and it is part of a series. The link to this is in the show notes. It's up on Drive-Thru RPG, part of a series that's called Critical Hits. I'm just going to read you what it says from Drive-Thru as far as what this series is about. It says, Critical Hits are a series of thrilling single-session adventures that focus on story, fun, and ease of play. So that should be what we're looking for out of this, right? It should be something we could feel like we could run in a single session. So I'm guessing from that between, say, 2 to 3 and 5 to 6 hours. I guess 4 hours maybe is the median time for a single session. I'm not sure. This one is for, it says 1st to 2nd level on the cover. On Drive-Thru, it says 1st level characters. So either way, we're talking low level PCs. I'm always interested in these types of adventures because I think they're just a lot of fun. I find if I'm thinking about adventures to write, I generally don't think of high level adventures. I always think of the low level ones, and I think the low level ones, they have a lot that they can offer. There's a lot of different angles to them. Is this for new players? Is it for new GMs? Is it like this one saying maybe it's just a snapshot capsule? What do they call it? A ship in a bottle adventure. I guess in TV they'll talk about an episode being a bottle episode. It's one that is completely self-contained and doesn't require anything from the outside, right? You just go in, you go to the episode, and then when you come out, essentially everything is unchanged. It just exists in its own little world. Is that like this, or is it something that's going to set up hooks for further missions down the road? There's a lot that can be done with these, but let's see what take they've got on it. So let's dig in here. It is subtitled A Tale of Misery and Woe. Get the credits, legalese. We'll get right to it. Okay, so no table of contents. I always like a table of contents, but this one's not a terribly long adventure. I did flip through just to see how many pages it is. I think it's 15 or 16 pages, so it's not, which I think for someone posted a poll on Twitter the other day asking for how many pages would you expect a product that was a single session product. And I think the voting, I believe the top winning poll, as I pull cat hair out of my face as my cat Bruce has decided to sit next to me, and I made the mistake of petting him, which sent up a cloud of hair. I believe the winning answer was 30 pages. That would be about double what this is. That seems a little bit overkill for 4 hours. And some people commented, hey, I could run a 4-hour session with a single page. And yes, you can. Depending on your style, you can. But for a published material, this probably seems like a good length. Enough to give you enough meat. Obviously, in some ways, the more material you get is the better. But I think maybe for new DMs, sometimes that more material can be overwhelming. So really, again, it's what is the audience for your game? Or is this for something that's supposed to teach new GMs how to play, and maybe you want to pare things down to what you think is absolutely necessary? Is this for maybe new players, but you are expecting a certain amount of experience from the GM, so you are okay in giving a lot of information because that empowers the GM if they're just pulling this out to run this on short notice, that sort of thing. So we'll see. Again, this is probably what I would say considered a regular length or the normal length of a adventure for this time frame. Maybe even a bit generous. I don't know. We'll get into it. Let's go. The Curse of Sapphire Lake. The Curse of Sapphire Lake is a dark fantasy adventure meant for a group of 4 first-level characters. I'll read a little bit from the intro. 30 years ago, the little hamlet of Kingsbridge was on the verge of becoming a proper town. It had loomed in the shadows of the hills for years, But Halfgard Trollsbane had finally slain the last of the monsters who had plagued his people. On the eve of their celebration, though, the hall doors were splintered by a hulking figure. Dripping with the dark waters of Sapphire Lake, the intruder was larger than any warrior in the hall, its face hidden by a war mask of pale white bone. It scythed through everyone who tried to stop it, barely slowed by blows that would have killed any mortal man. It vaulted the days, and with a single swing of its blade, cleaved Halfgard's head from his shoulders. Then it vanished into the night, leaving a trail of gore and blood that stopped at the rocky shores of the lake. Though many searched, no one could find the creature who had slain the Trollsbane. Several who went looking were found dead, and others were never found at all. Whispers began that it was no man that they sought, but a vengeful spirit of one of the old kings that once ruled in these hills. With the death of their headman, no one had the will to stay in Kingsbridge any longer. Last year, Halfgard's son, Siegfried, gathered a band to rebuild Kingsbridge. The very image of his father, Siegfried sneered at the legends that something haunted the ruins of the town. He brought his people to the place where he'd been born, and they set to work to clearing, hammering, and sawing. And at first their fires and songs seemed to keep the night at bay. But it wasn't long before things began to go wrong. Tools went missing. Trees fell over recently cleared paths and roads. Food vanished from larders, and fires began unexpectedly. The people carried on, but they began to catch sight of a strange figure in the night mists. A huge man in tattered clothing, with matted hair and beard, his face concealed behind an ancient war mask of carved bone. Several brave adventurers have attempted to track this creature, but though some claim success, the thing always returned to harry the town. Returns. Worse, many hunters have disappeared, or been found without their heads. There is real fear in Kingsbridge, and the people's courage holds on by little more than a thread. If peace does not come soon, Kingsbridge will return to shadowed ruins. So there we have it. So there is the intro. We get a history of this place, Kingsbridge at Sapphire Lake. We get a little bit of the history, what happened here, what's gone wrong, the problem that needs solving. Some mysterious figure seeming to have coming from the lake has come, first destroyed the town in the past, and now as the son of the ruler of that incarnation of the town is returned, now is going about destroying this incarnation of the town. Seems like a great place for some adventurers to show up, right, and figure out this mystery. I presume we shall see. So here we have it says arrival at Kingsburg, and we have looks like a black box of text, which I'm assuming is maybe the kind of thing as the GM you would read out to the players, though it is not marked. Presumably, we're assuming the players are arriving at Kingsburg. Then we come on to a page, or a map on the next page, that gives us Kingsburg and how it's situated in Sapphire Lake. Nice hexes. I can't see here. There's a compass rose. It's a little bit dim. I don't feel like zooming in. I can't quite tell what the scale of these hexes are. But essentially we have the town, the bridge, presumably over after which the town was named, and then the lake. And this is, the terrain is such that you could obviously drop this pretty much anywhere, right? You just need a lake, and you could just, it's not a huge feature, so you could pretty much put that wherever you think a lake might be, and then you could drop the town in. So if you have an existing campaign map, you could throw this in there. And of course, if you don't, you could use this as the start of your campaign map. Let's see what they say about Kingsbridge. So I'm not going to read the text to speak out loud. I'm just going to get more into the details of what they're giving you. So they're saying Kingsbridge as a settlement is quite off the beaten track. While it was initially set up for logging and farming, there is no travel that comes this way by accident. As such, you should be sure that every PC has a reason to come here. That's a good thing. It's always good to make sure your PCs have reasons. If you're running this, and it seems like the suggestion is as a one-shot, if you're using existing characters and you have to figure out how to get those existing characters from whatever they were doing before to this, but presumably at first level, they really haven't done much, or they should not have done much, so maybe you can build that in as part of character generation. If you were deciding to do this with pre-gens, that would be easy just to build in reasons, but if they were making new characters and you thought, I will run this and then potentially run more things, so we're going to go through the process of creating characters, easy enough to mandate to everyone or kind of walk them through, giving them reasons to be in Kingsbridge or arriving in Kingsbridge. Perhaps some of them are even from the town, which would make it easy. Or they were from the old town, or their parents were from the old town. Examples that are given here, one is blood debt. The PC lost a family member or friend to the attacks, either recently or in the distant past. Whether vengeance is something they truly desire or simply what's expected of them, they're here for retribution. That's one of them. And that could work for the group, too. There's no reason why you can't have the whole group have relations, which has the benefit of, if you're doing group-linked backgrounds, which you should do, then having them all be related in that way, all kin or all close friends whose parents were all ones who fled, or they were taken away as kids, but their parents didn't make it out, gives a good reason for them all to be back. Another example is my home. The PC came to Kingsbridge with the hope of starting a new life, but with this new threat stalking their homes, it's clear they aren't safe yet. That would be abundantly clear. Another one they give is Monster Hunter. Those who hunt monsters would have quite the feather in their cap if they stopped the creature stalking Kingsbridge. While no reward has been offered yet, there are rumors of a treasure left behind by the original founders. Surely the grateful town would be happy to give their savior a proper reward. Sure. Maybe so, or of course you can always sprinkle treasure wherever the monster's lair is, and maybe there's treasure there already. Or you do it just for the reputation of being a monster hunter, which again is not a bad way to start off your group if they can gain some rep in this area as successful monster hunters. That opens up all kinds of plot hooks of people running up and saying, please, please, famous monster hunters, help me solve this problem. The PCs are not greeted by any of the folk who live in Kingsbridge except for chilly nods, and if they try to start any conversations, they're told to see Siegfried in the Longhouse. As the headman, he prefers to greet any guests personally. So they're not going to get a warm welcome. Probably just as well. Just from a first adventuring standpoint, just having everyone point and say, go see this guy, who is presumably going to be the quest giver in a sense, is not a bad idea. Because people can get lost with you come to town and you start doing all kinds of stuff, but particularly when you're running a one-shot, the faster you can get your group to the adventure, the better. Because at the end of the day, if you have 4 or 5 hours and you end up spending an hour or two doing nothing in the town, just kind of farting around, that's not a good use of the time. So here they're saying, look, no one's going to be friendly. If you try to talk them up, they're just going to say, go see Siegfried. So unless they're just really obstinate, your crew is probably going to end up sooner rather than later going to see Siegfried. And of course, that leads us to the next section, inside the Longhouse. If the PCs approach, Siegfried welcomes them gruffly. Despite his relative youth, he has the look of a man who has seen his share of battles and hardships. There's a couple other people in there, and they give a couple of stats. Let's see. The other person is a young woman with thick chestnut mane and fire in her blue eyes. A DC 17 history check reveals that she is Alaria Treesong, a witch woman that Siegfried brought with him to allay the fears that Kingsbridge was cursed. That's an interesting character. Just as a formatted thing, I'd like some of these things highlighted. It would be nice to know if, hey, here's this person. Maybe give them a little box. It's just in the text of just the within the paragraph form. And I don't know. I think I might like that broken out a bit. Just makes it a little bit more. I mean, obviously, if you're running this, you should read the whole thing, in which case you should make your note that, hey, Alaria is here, and she's famous enough that if you, in her own way, that obviously DC 17 is a high roll, but particularly for first level characters, but, you know, it's doable that somebody might actually have heard of her as far as who she is. Might break that out. Maybe they'll give her a full little character stat block later on. We'll see, but and there she is. Alaria Treesbane. And then we have Valthus Jarl, who I didn't mention. Then we have Siegfried himself. Does he have anything cool? Okay, she's a spellcaster. She's got a quarter staff. Siegfried has a great axe, unarmored. And Valthus Jarl has a short sword. Those who already live in Kingsbridge should be waiting in the Longhouse for the other PCs to arrive. So if you have a party and some of them decided to make their backgrounds that they're from Kingsbridge, they'll already be in the Longhouse. The other PCs come, get quickly pointed to the Longhouse, and so then you have the PCs kind of meeting up if they're not already known. I would always suggest, whether it's a one-shot or anything, just have the PCs start out knowing each other. Unless you have, I mean, it's a group, all right, everything's group dependent. If you have a group that's highly social and they want to do a lot of that social role play, and you know that ultimately they are all going to go with the flow and, you know, and make that group meeting and not turn it into something painful, which can happen sometimes when groups just, for whatever reason, they just don't want to. I mean, I've seen this mostly when a new character or new player joins and everybody knows at a meta level that this new player's here to play, but then their character shows up. And people are like trying their best not to get that character in the party. I don't know him. Who did he come from? I hate all newcomers, and he's a newcomer. I don't know who he is. I'm not going to talk to him. And you just kind of roll your eyes and think, come on, guys. We're all here to game on a player level. Let's just, if you got a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if you have to disturb your immersion for a moment to get this other guy into the mix or woman, whomever, get this other character into the mix, this other player so that they can play, then let's do that. But if they have not, and if you are playing that they all are strangers, or maybe they're in different subgroups of who knows who, they're all going to meet up at the Longhouse. When the party makes its intention of slaying the creature that has been terrorizing the town known, Siegfried's mood brightens noticeably. He offers the PCs guest quarters in the hall as well as food while they stay with him. Valthus and Alaria seem reluctant, but they share what information they have if the PCs ask them about the creature and its habits. So I guess the assumption is here that if you're coming to Trollsbane, if you're getting into this adventure, you know all about the creature and you're here to stop it one way or another. You're not coming here wondering. This is not the adventure start if you're coming in looking for a ye old job board to find a job. So, right, the assumption is, or as the GM, if we were prepping this, we have to prep this with in mind that we have to kind of build it in or come up with our own little side bit to ensure that the PCs show up at this point, knowing the job needs to be done, or we have to change, their tack inside the Longhouse so that they give them this, oh, here's this thing you can do. Because I had said before, I'm sure Siegfried is a quest giver, but in this case, he's positioned that he's waiting for you, in a sense, to say what we're here to do, not telling you this is what we need doing. Though it would be, obviously easy if the PCs showed up and they didn't have any idea what was going on for Siegfried to say, you haven't heard about the monster and da-da-da-da, we don't have room for freeloaders, but if you're here to do that kind of work, we can give you some accommodations and perhaps a share of the treasure or whatever. There's rumor of treasure there, whatever the hook and bait they feel like will get you on the case. Let's say we have a Valthus. I'm not sure if this is a rumor or truth. Maybe we'll find out. Valthus believes the creature is a Grundhelm. In the olden days, kings would be buried in great mounds with their treasure to mark and honor them. The most powerful kings had warriors buried with them, dressed for battle and wearing bone helms carved from giant skulls. If someone trespassed on their tombs and stole something of value, then the warrior would rise and find who had stolen from his master until that honor was returned. And find who had stolen. Okay, there's something's missing there. It was relentless, and it would not rest until it completed its task. Valthus was there when the thing came and killed his lord 30 years ago. The monster took his hand when he stood in its path. No man is as strong or as unyielding as the thing that slew the Trollsbane. That Valthus will swear to. Have you seen the 13th Warrior? This has very 13th Warrior tones to it. That was not a creature of this nature, or they did something different with that. But the idea of a once proud settlement that is now in fear of an implacable, potentially supernatural foe. And here we have Alaria. So this kind of stuff is good. Again, I wish they would have called that a little bit differently, but of course, as we're doing now, we are supposed to read this stuff through before we throw it in front of our players. But I wouldn't have minded a little bit of formatting to kind of highlight some of the stuff. Alaria, for her part, agrees that Valthus has the right of the legend, but disagrees that what they face is, in fact, a Grundhelm. A true Grundhelm is an engine of wrath, but it is always direct. Like a hunting hound, it comes for those who have wronged its master, slays them, and takes back what they stole from it. They are not crafty, and they do not use stealth and guile to harry an opponent to exhaustion the way this creature has. Nor are they interested in causing widespread destruction. A Grundhelm has one goal, and that's to restore its master's tomb. This creature has caused all sorts of wanton destruction, and besides, a Grundhelm is largely a creature of spirit. Any such things would be stopped at the edges of the settlement by the wards she has put in place. Whatever lies beneath that mask, it is no grave guardian. So first of all, I kind of like this. We have two opposing points of view, and it's really up to us. At this point, the text has not suggested which one of these is correct. Whether Alaria, I mean, it's really whether, is it a Grundhelm, yes or no? One side says yes, one side says no. For my part, reading this, what Alaria is saying makes sense to me. But it would be interesting if you put these voices in the game. The players are free to decide who's right or who's wrong, or what they believe. Do they believe it is a tomb guardian, or is it something else? It would have been nice if Alaria had another idea. I kind of like the idea that she would have her own thing. No, it's not a Grundhelm. It must be something else. And then later in the game, maybe we can find out if who was right or who was wrong, or if it's even a third thing altogether. Or, you know, that crazy Mr. Jones from the farm who was just pretending to be a supernatural creature all along. Damn it, you kids! If this were the Scooby-Doo version, and who knows, it might be. I have not read ahead. I do not know what awaits us. There's a DC 10 persuasion check to talk with, I guess, someone else who's in there. I skipped over who was in the room, so... Another individual named Benton Yarwick, a big young man who hides his lack of years with a scruffy beard. He makes regular supply runs with his cart, but it's become difficult because of all the harassment. Okay, so if we succeed on this persuasion check, those who succeed at a... Okay, hold on. So you can make... Oh, sorry. So first there's a DC 10 persuasion check. And what does he tell you if you make that check? It doesn't say. Okay, so if you make a DC... Is that just a DC 10 persuasion check to talk with him? Or I guess it must be. So maybe he just won't talk to you unless you can really persuade him. He's a man of few words unless you break through the crust of his gruff exterior. If you can, he will tell you about the stuff he has seen. Ragged marks, the trees that are being downed, the amount of work that's gone into clearing the roads. It's taking its toll on everyone. And it means they're not working on other things because they're constantly redoing work. Marks on the trees that have been torn down, etc. So you get a little... If you can do that persuasion check, you're going to get some extra evidence. Circumstantial evidence of something harassing these villagers. Now, beyond that, if you succeed at a DC 15 persuasion check, you find the household of Boars, a red-headed man with the look of a fighter who's trying to be a farmer, and his wife Vigri, a woman with wide hips, a thick blonde braid, impressive set of keys on one hip, and a heavy-bladed knife on the other. I'm not sure, so... Oh, you know what? I missed a header. My bad. So this is down in the town. Okay, so Benton is not in the longhouse. I totally missed that header and that first paragraph. So basically, once you come out of the meeting in the longhouse, you can kind of mess around town. And here are people in town who, I guess, at this point, if you can persuade them, will talk to you. One of which is this Benton Yarwick, who will tell you about the roads and what a pain that's become. If you make a DC 15 persuasion check, they don't say to whom. You could almost run this like a skill challenge, but they're all based on persuasion, so maybe that's... And I just did a video on a book of skill challenges. You can see, go and check on YouTube for other streams. You can check that out, but they had some skill challenges that would have fit the bill for this type of thing. But if you You roll another. So the DC 15 persuasion check, I guess you will be pointed in a direction, because it's not like you would use persuasion to find the household, but maybe you would get somebody who would tell you that you could talk to them and they would talk to you, or maybe you have to make the persuasion check when you talk to them. And then you will find Boris and Vigri. Let's see. Boris is obviously a strong man. Someone set fire to his house. So again, we're more intelligence gathering. So here the Boris and Vigri household was lit with fire. And then Vigri pops out, and she says it was the Grundhelm. She saw him clear. Stood very close to her. And Boris says that others have a similar run-in. So here we have some evidence that might point to the Grundhelm if you're believing Valthus. If you make a DC 20 investigation check, you find a strange woman. So maybe she's hiding somewhere, so you really got to be poking around the town. She's described as willowy. Her dress and thick mane of black hair are both ragged. She's barefoot. If they find her sitting on when you find her, she's sitting on a tree stump, staring towards a lake. She's singing to herself and not paying attention to anything about. I think there's a boxed text that I guess is her song. I'm just going to speak it because I am no singer. The bone man walks through the darkness. The bone man stalks through the mist. Hide your face from the bone man, or by his blade you'll be kissed. He rises at night from the waters, turn dark and black neath the moon. But it's a hole down to hell that he comes from, which he'll return to again very soon. So, all right, nice little rhyme. Clearly a love song. So she is someone who is, I guess they would say in this kind of situation, touched by some forces. She doesn't respond if you try to talk to her. But an older woman will come and take her sort of gently away. They seem to be related. And then if they talk to the older woman, you'll find out it's the girl's aunt. Her name is Bara. She's a seamstress and a weaver. And she took in her niece after her parents died at Kingsbridge. She was just a baby. See, Lindara is the girl's name, and she has a tendency to kind of wander. If anyone asks about the song she was singing, Bara just sort of smiles. She doesn't know what it means, but Elise has been singing it for weeks. It's gotten to the point where Bara barely hears it anymore. She's just tuned it out. Seems significant. We'll see as we go on exactly how significant. I wonder if it is significant if I would not give it a lower DC or make it easier to come across, because if that rhyme is important, I want to make sure the players find it. Particularly this is a low-level game, thinking maybe for low-level players, potentially new players. I want to give them everything they have. If this is just a little bit of extra and it's just flavor, which at the point, right now it is since we don't know anything else, but then maybe that's okay. But yeah, I might put that more front and center. And of course, as GM, that's what we can do if we think it's important. We could put the girl at the edge of the town, and when the players leave to go to the lake, which I'm assuming they will, at some point maybe they'll run across her, or maybe we put her in the town square. We can put her in the party's path is what I'm saying, if it turns out that this is important. But we don't know yet if it is important. That's something we will have to figure out as we go along. The text has not given us any clues to if it is or is not. We must read on. The next section is the first night.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
I didn't ask you, Amazon device. I don't know why Alexa... Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Goes off sometimes for no apparent reason. I suppose that Jeff Bezos is just listening in. Hi, Jeff. If you're listening, welcome to the show. Okay, the first night. Once the evening begins to fall, the air starts to turn chill. Mists rise from Sapphire Lake, creeping through the trees and surrounding Kingsbridge. Valthus urges the party to retreat to the Longhouse, very much 13th Warrior-esque, where they can more easily keep watch on the goings-on below. A meal is served, and as the last of the light leaves the sky, Siegfried asks the party to stand the night's watch. Oh yeah, this is This is definitely giving me 13th Warrior vibes. They didn't have many warriors when the band first came to Kingsbridge, and his men are stretched thin by the strains and the dangers of the days. There are balconies facing each of the cardinal directions, allowing those with bows to keep a steady eye out, and horns hang from nearby posts to sound the alarm should some emergency happen. So I guess you don't have to, because the next paragraph begins with, if the party chooses to stand the watch. So I suppose the party could say, screw you, Siegfried, we're going to bed. But I don't know. What a terrible party. What self-respecting party wouldn't jump at the bit to take a watch and see what comes? Get their hands dirty. So if the party chooses to stay and watch, we're going to roll a d4 to see which direction the Grundhelm comes. Okay, so now here in the GM notes, it has been revealed. It is a Grundhelm. This is where I could probably think, well, why not just put that at the top and say, hey, nobody knows, or it's disputed, but it is a Grundhelm. But now we know, and spoilers if you're a player of this, unfortunately now you know, it is indeed a Grundhelm. Valthus was correct. Apparently, Alaria was overthinking it. Alright, so if we roll a 1, it's coming from the north. 2, south, we get the rest. If you're on a balcony, make a perception check opposed by the Grundhelm's stealth check. Due to the encroaching mist, the Grundhelm receives advantage on his stealth roll. I might also say what you could do, which maybe is easier and a little bit less, again, for new players, potentially new dungeon masters. You could roll for the Grundhelm stealth versus the PC's passive perception and just give the Grundhelm advantage. Then you get to roll the dice, and then you just tell the players if they see anything instead of asking for perception checks from the players. It's a style thing. Either way it works. Essentially, it amounts to the same thing. The first sign of the Grundhelm's presence, if no one spots him. Oh, and by the way, if your players want to, maybe you add different things happening, they can make their perception check. Just use the roll that you made for the Grundhelm as the target. So the Grundhelm rolls a 15. PCs are making their perception checks. They just roll against 15. If they do, they spot. And you still give them. You can still give them disadvantage if you want to, or you can just, if you gave the Grundhelm advantage, then it's already built in and you don't have to have them roll more than one die. But that's up to you. The first sign of the Grundhelm's presence, if no one spots him, is a flicker of flame in the mist roughly 60 feet from the base of the longhouse. The flames rise, and then there's the twang of a bowstring. A flaming arrow sinks into the thatch of the roof and begins to catch. At that point, have the players roll initiative. So if no one spots the Grundhelm, he comes, lights up an arrow, or lights up a flaming arrow and shoots it into the thatch of the roof. I'm guessing we're talking about the roof of the longhouse, not the roof of somewhere else. And then battle begins. If the PCs refused the requested guard duty, okay, this is interesting. This is good to know. It's always good to have in, if there's something where you're giving the party an option, have both sides of the option, right? If they were given a yes or no choice. Hey, we'd love it if you did this, and the PCs say, no. Yeah, give us what happens. I almost would have put that first because I'm assuming that's the shorter bit, and then we're going to jump back to what happens in this first encounter. But let's see what happens. If they refuse, and they're in their quarters, they must make a DC 14 perception check to notice when the arrows start impacting the roof. Okay, so if the PCs aren't on watch, then the Grundhelm is going to arrive unmolested, unseen. And then the PCs have to make a higher check. But what if they're asleep? I guess that's an interesting question. Is that DC 14 just across the board, or we're assuming that they're still awake when this happens? How late in the night does the Grundhelm begin their attack? We can just have to roll with what happens if the PCs decide to go to bed right away. Maybe give them disadvantage. Hopefully they would put somebody on watch, because clearly this place isn't super safe, but maybe they would just trust to the other people and everyone goes to bed. If no one makes the check, one of the NPC guards sounds a warning sounds a warning horn after 3 arrows have landed in the thatch. Once the PCs notice something is awry, have them roll initiative and head towards the side of the longhouse where the warning horn sounded. Okay, There must be something significant to the 3 arrows. I suppose. Is there some kind of... are we going to find a longhouse burning table or some other way to quantify this? Let us continue on. The Grunhelm will continue firing flaming arrows into the longhouse if no one approaches to stop him. Every arrow that hits AC 10 lights a single square on fire. I'm assuming maybe we're going to get a battle map here. Otherwise, the squares don't really... It's not a meaningful measurement for me. Every round, every flaming square spreads to a new adjacent 5-foot square that must be soaked with water, beaten out with a cloak, or magically stopped to prevent further spreading. While it is possible to see the rough outline of the Grunhelm through the mist, those who are more than 30 feet from him have disadvantage on their shots into the mist, and the Grunhelm has the same disadvantage for his flaming arrows. Okay. So really, it is a AC 10 check, but the reality is he's -5, right? So it's kind of AC 15, actually. If approached, the Grunhelm tosses his bow aside and draws his Nightblade. Roughly the length of a short sword, it's only sharpened on one edge, and the grip is made from wood, so old it's petrified to stone. That's cool. A DC 13 history check reveals that these hewing weapons were common among the warriors who once frequented these hills, and who are now buried beneath them. Though he attacks with fearsome single-mindedness, the Grunhelm seems to have no interest in finishing off opponents who are not a threat to him. Additionally, once he has been brought below 20 hit points or taken a total of 25 points of damage, whichever comes first, he disengages and flees, leaving his bow behind, and runs into the mist. And then we get a picture of the Grunhelm. It's got a skull covering his face. I will read the black text for this one. This hulking figure is dressed in tattered rags. Its mane of hair and coarse beard of a rat's nest of tangles. Its visage is hidden by a strange mask carved from the skull of a giant, the teeth engraved with runes of power and protection. I won't go through the stats of the Grunhelm. I do want to see, he's only a challenge rating 1. He's got 42 hit points. The only problem I see here, and it's not necessarily a problem, but it can happen in combat, is let's say he was sitting at, okay, so if he gets brought below 20 hit points, so he's at 42, and you could roll to give him more hit points or just give him some other hit points in the range. He's a 40, 12 plus, looks like 16 they have there. But they have him at 42. If he's taken 19 hit points, so almost 20, he would be down to 23. He would stick. But that means that if in the next round, before his turn comes up again, or its turn comes up again, he could easily, potentially take the next 20. It seems like there's a chance he could get downed. It could get down before it reaches that run away point. Essentially, they give it a bloodied state, right? Get it down to half hit points. That was a 4th edition thing. You're bloodied. If you're bloodied, you can kind of do things, give you a visible thing. His thing seems to be, when bloodied, essentially, run. He does get 1 hit point per round back. He has some minor regeneration. It has some minor regeneration. And then it has an ability called Undying Vitality. Once per day, the Grunhelm's Wrath and Sheer Determination allows him to heal 1d10 plus Constitution modifier hit points, using this ability as a bonus action. I would almost say better as a reaction, because again, I just... Sometimes the problem is when you have one monster, this could kind of run into exactly what can happen. And maybe if he goes down, he goes down. That's just the way it ends up. But when you have one monster like this, and it doesn't have any saving graces, you can end up in a situation, just through luck, good or bad, takes 19 hit points of damage, not quite at that bloodied point, not quite at half, hasn't taken 25 or 20. So as a GM, if we're not thinking on our feet and we don't think, okay, he's really close to this point and he's going to definitely pass by it next round, so I'm going to run now and take my chances, use that undying vitality and just dash into the fog. If I say, okay, well, he hasn't taken 20 hit points yet, so he's sticking, next round he could be down before he has a chance to do anything. So you definitely want to be aware of it. I don't know if I would have given it some kind of ability to quickly get away, summon the mist, do some kind of mist hop. Once you could make it once per day. I mean, if you're interested in balancing it, it doesn't really matter. Once per day is probably fine because he's only going to show up once per day. It's only going to show up once per day anyway. You're going to bounce away in the night, and then the night will pass, right? So that's interesting. There's a capability here that your foe that you maybe mean to challenge the party multiple times could just go down 1, 2, 3, done. It does have the Nightblade. Let's see, anything. That's just a cool name. It does 1d6 plus 4 damage, slashing damage. That's nice. There is let's see, is it wearing there's something called the Juggernaut's Helm. I'm guessing that's the skull. It is a wondrous item. It is rare and it requires attunement. While wearing this helm, the bearer has resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage. Okay, so I kind of wish that was included in the stat block somewhere or in the text, because that does make a difference since you'll get a lot of. So it will be protected by a bunch of your regular attacks. So that will give it some extra power. But remember, with these things, you're one failed save away from something grabbing you. You know, you're one creature, you're one failed save away from just getting immobilized or grappled or, you know, whatever. And then you don't get a chance to use some of these crazy abilities. Now that resistance, you don't have to use it. It's just always on. So that definitely means it'll be harder to take down. But when the only way of escaping is just to literally run away, you could very well be in a spot where your single guy just doesn't get an opportunity to run away. Gets stuck in place, gets grappled, gets tripped, gets pushed over, and then he keeps spending actions to get up and try to run, and then turns over, and then wham, wham, wham. So be aware when you're using one villain. Like I said, I might have given it some kind of just quick escape ability, some kind of fog, something or other, just to help it scoot out. But we'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's one of those things you kind of have to just pick up with as you're going. If it runs, or I suppose at some point it must flee, it doesn't really have anything else to do. It doesn't look like it's been given a goal. Alright, if the wearer is alive, and I guess for purposes of this, the Grunhelm is alive, you cannot take that helm off. Only you can take it off, like the ruby slippers. Those who give chase when the Grunhelm flees must make DC 12, 14, and then 16 acrobatics checks in order to dodge obstacles in the mist and follow the Grunhelm. Those who make all 3 checks do not catch up to him, but they do find themselves at the shore of Sapphire Lake. The tracks lead down the pebble beach towards one of the rocky spires. In a stroke of heat lightning, I'm not sure I'm familiar with what heat lightning is, they catch sight of the Grunhelm clambering up the spire. A second stroke reveals him standing near the top, silhouetted against the sky. When a third stroke comes, though, the outcrop is deserted. A heavy splash sounds from the water, but those who search around the base see nothing in the darkness, just dark water and the ripples the falling body left behind. All right. So this first night happens, the Grunhelm makes his attacks. In theory, you cannot, or you're not supposed to, defeat the Grunhelm in this first battle. I question, again, I just for myself, I maybe question whether they gave the Grunhelm enough to just make sure it gets away and doesn't end up succumbing to that thing that happens a lot where you throw your big bad guy out at the party thinking, oh, they've got no chance and I can do X, Y, and Z, and then they end up downing it, and then you don't know what to do. So again, I might beef that up a little bit, not necessarily with offensive abilities, but just with defensive abilities or some kind of quick travel, get out of jail free type card to get it back in the mist and get away. If it does go according to Hoyle and it makes it in the mist, you can chase it, but you got to make some pretty darn good acrobatics checks. And if you make all of those, you don't really get to catch up, but you just get to get through. Those seem to be DC 12, DC 14, and the DC 16. Those are kind of tough. Kind of tough to catch. So I don't know how many groups are going to have somebody. And this again, you know, having done that read through of a skill challenge book. This is something you could position as a skill challenge. Let the whole group get in there, and I would let them, instead of just saying it has to be acrobatics, let them use some different things. Maybe you can use athletics and just bulldoze over whatever it is that's standing in the way, or use your acrobatics, use your keen senses. Right? Let the group get together, and between them find some ways of tracking the Grundhelm, because I think this bit about at the end here, what the Grundhelm does at the end of it, it seems like it's probably important. So I don't want to gate it. I'm keeping in mind that I don't want to gate the party from information that I feel like is important. Now, I'm just reading this through the first time, so I can't say for sure if this, like the other thing, if it is truly important, right? I don't know if the song is important yet. I don't know if this is important, but if these things are important, if I want the party to get these bits of information, I don't want to gate them too much. So I might make it a skill challenge, and I might keep it at the lower DC, either maybe 12, I think. I mean, if you're level 1, DC 12 is certainly not a given. DC 16 can be tough if you don't, particularly if you don't have somebody. If you're playing with a rogue, that's probably fairly doable, but again, the dice are the dice. If you don't have a rogue, or you don't have somebody who's an acrobat specialist, then, you know, that's almost, you're getting into the realms of that's really hard unless you're lucky with the dice. And if this is important for them to see that whole climb of the spire and whatnot, I don't want to put it behind so many rolls that there's little chance they'll see it. In any case, the Grundhelm is gone, and now we're at picking up the trail. Oh, and by the way, they didn't really get into, so they talk about squares and stuff, but I didn't see a map. Maybe there's a map of the Longhouse somewhere, because they had this bit about squares and lighting on fire, but I didn't see anything about mechanics of how that's supposed to work, or what you do if for whatever reason the Longhouse burns to the ground. They don't mention in this bit, unless I missed it, if players are supposed to be splitting up and taking care of the Longhouse versus trying to go after the Grundhelm, and maybe that's assumed, and that's why they figured the Grundhelm was more survivable, because the party will be trying to put out the fire, but they haven't mentioned a lot about what happens there. What are the other people in the Longhouse doing? Where's Siegfried and Valthus and Alaria and all that? While the Longhouse still stands, the Grundhelm's attacks in the night did manage to do quite a bit of damage. Siegfried expresses his gratitude that the PCs faced that monster, but he regrets he could not have joined them in battle against it. Okay, so he wasn't there. He owes the thing a blood debt, and he means to pay. He believes that its craven attack in the darkness means that it's afraid. But if you make a DC 14 insight check, though, notice there is something not quite right in Siegfried's eyes. An obsession that might be slowly turning into madness. All right. Madness, obsession. You could also, if someone wasn't on the insight, you could probably do something with Siegfried's deception versus passive insight or passive perception. See if you pick up that he's not being truthful about it. If you don't want the PCs to make the rolls, or if they choose not to. The Grundhelm's bow sits where he dropped it, and it is a work of aged craftsmanship. Sounds nice. Should be, if it's an old, highly prized bow. The runes engraved along the bow are tied to Car Thobal, a great warrior who would have been buried with many such fine weapons. It was said that Car Thobal couldn't be killed by any mortal foe, and that no wound, no matter how deep, would stagger him for long. All right, so are we saying that this is Car Thobal? Unknown. Here we have a DM note. If the party does not expressly go to find the bow, have them stumble across it when they leave the longhouse. A simple perception check means it catches someone's eye in the daylight and it acts as a segue into this clue. So they're saying here, hey, if nobody spots the longbow, you kind of want to make sure they get it because it is a clue that is important. The clue here being the identity or possible identity of either the Grunhelm itself or for whom the Grunhelm might serve or be serving, and that is the great warrior Carthobal. From what the text is saying, maybe it is Carthobal himself, because that regeneration that it has would speak to the lore of Carthobal, but we shall see. Okay, if nobody can make the check to decipher the runes, they can take the bow to Alaria. She is shocked to see it, spending long moments handling it and tracing the runes. So if the runes prove indecipherable, they can take it to Alaria, but again, we're left with, well, what if they don't? Maybe in that case, have Alaria find them. I heard you found the bow, kind of let me see it, sort of thing. Okay, here we have. So I had said before that I thought it was important, or it seemed like it was important that the PCs kind of have that moment with the Grunhelm at the lake. So now the adventure does talk about if they were unsuccessful, which given the checks they have to make seems pretty likely. If the PCs did not successfully track the Grunhelm after their fight, they could make a DC 15 survival check to follow his tracks down to the beach. The PCs can follow the prince to the foot of one of the spires around the lake, seeing that the Grunhelm went up it, but never came down or left that spot. Additionally, those who follow his tracks notice that the Grunhelm is huge, but his feet are definitely human in the marks they've left behind. His boots are soft-soled as well, which are often favored by woodsmen and scouts, instead of the heavy boots that Siegfried, Balthus, and many other men in Kingsbridge seem to prefer. Now we're getting more hints, more clues that maybe this is not quite what it seems. And maybe even though the text has been calling it a Grunhelm in the GM facing stuff up until now, maybe it's not a Grunhelm at all. Maybe we are in Scooby-Doo territory and it's going to turn out to be some farmer who's pissed that the Siegfried came back and he was looking for the treasure or found some treasure and wants to keep the rest. We don't know yet. It is a mystery. Some of these checks seem high, but I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on what your checks should be. DC 15. So I feel like, again, it might be one of those things I just give to them, right? No one else is running around the village down to the lake because they're scared crapless out of it. So one set of boot prints down there, I might just let them find. And again, during the day, there is no... They don't have... Well, one, they don't have much else to do. There's no particular time constraint. So this runs into that thing that can be an issue of... You roll, okay, I want to roll survival and track and find the tracks. Okay, roll. 13. Sorry, you didn't find it. I want to try. Can I try again? Right? There's no, in this case, there's no ticking clock. They have all day, I presume, until, I'm assuming the Grunhelm or whatever it is comes out at night and does its thing at night. So there is no time constraint to them spending all day walking around trying to find tracks. So rather than have them roll and then either they don't follow this, what really I would assume is a fairly important lead, or they're going to keep rolling until they get what they want. Neither one is a good outcome for the game. So just give it to them. Put the tracks out, and then what I would do is have the tracks, you find the tracks, and then for that higher check, you can have that bit of noticing about the soft, how the boots don't match up with what the warriors seem to be wearing, or the men here, right? That extra bit. So you find the tracks, but maybe you get that extra bit on the survival check. I would maybe amend that piece for that. Oh, maybe I should just turn the page. So if they're going to tell you, if none of the PCs make the necessary survival check, they can ask around. Most folks say they didn't see anything as they close their doors and windows. However, Lindara attests that she saw the Bone Man from the roof last night. All right, so that's another way you can do it. But again, I probably wouldn't go that far. I would probably either just, like I said, just have them find the tracks and then put that little extra information behind the check. Or you could just have people saying, we saw where he went. He went down to the beach. But down to the lake. But, we kind of know that already because the whole assumption is it's coming from the lake. So I guess if there was a twist and it wasn't coming from the lake, that would be different. But in this case, since everything's pointing to the lake and we want everybody to go to the lake, I would probably just make it super easy to get everybody to the lake. When the party goes down to the lake and examines the area around the base of the spire of rock, they find that there is a steep drop-off after no more than a few feet. The pebble beach slopes down quickly, then shears off altogether after no more than 10 feet. Those who make a DC 15 perception check, advantage to those with dark vision, realize there is a tunnel at the base of the spire, roughly 50 feet down. It looks like it's barely 5 feet on a side, but it's possible that someone could fit through it. Those who swim down into the lake are closer and thus only have to make a DC 12 perception check, assuming no one saw it from higher up. So it seems like you go up the spire and then it drops down a fairly high drop into the water. But somewhere down there, I'm trying to... This is kind of where I could have maybe used a diagram. So we have the spire. It's really not... don't think I got a good idea of how tall the spire is. The guy went scrambling up, kind of scrambling up. And at the base, I'm guessing the base of the spire that fronts to the lake, which is more than 50 feet high at this point, and somewhere down there, there is a tunnel entrance or a cave entrance. If you come at it from the lakeside, I guess swimming, could you do it in a boat? You could see it with a DC 12 perception check. So there's definitely something in the spire. That paragraph's a little bit unclear to me. I just don't get I could use a better sense of how that spire looks. I don't need a technical drawing, but even just an artist rendering of kind of here's the lake, here's one side, and maybe have it at an angle where I could just see both sides. Say, okay, there's a hole into the spire, and in terms of how far, it's 50 feet from the top. Does that mean it's at the water base? Is it right above the water lake level? Is it partly submerged in the lake? Maybe we'll find out, because the next section is called Into the Lake. The PCs who swim down to examine the tunnel find that it is indeed a wide crack in the rock that seems to go in quite deep. Those who bring a magical light source or who have dark vision also see that handholds have been clawed into the rock face. Is this on the inside or outside of the crack? Though the distance between the handholds suggests the person who has been using them likely has extremely long arms and colossal strength. Additionally, there is a frayed length of rope hanging from a naturally formed hook. There's another survival check, this time DC 13. If you make it, you will note that this rope likely held some kind of stone in place, concealing the opening until recently. Okay, so they go into the lake, they check it out, they see handholds that look like could be something monstrous, and you can play up that, oh my gosh, it must have been some huge monster, some bigger, it could not have been a man to use those handholds, and yet we have this other rock that was being held in place by some frayed rope. So part of it screams out for something more than human, and part of it screams out something very human. Here we have a red box of text with a DM note in it that I will read, since it seems like it is important. The PC should be urged to follow the trail. They attempt to set up an ambush, or to wait out the Grundhelm at the water's edge. Siegfried should approach them. So maybe the whole... So I guess I'm... All right. So, yeah, this is where the diagram of how everything relates, because I assume that Siegfried's not swimming out to them, which means if they're waiting around the water's edge, they're waiting on the lake side. But do you have a good view of that dark crack entrance thing from the lakeside, or do you have to be on the water side to see it? And if you have a view, it's natural that you'd want to set up an ambush, but if you can't see it, then it would seem weird, because presumably the creature could come out take a look at you before you could see it, and then just go out somewhere else and not, you don't have a view on the target, so it'd be hard to set up an ambush for that. All right, but if they are hanging out, Siegfried should approach them. He could tell them they found something. And if they suggest waiting, he pulls a heavy gold ring off his bicep and promises one to each of them if they follow that beast into its lair and slay it. So, okay, so if the party tries to play it safe, and this is that weird thing, because I would almost want the parties to be thinking this way. I did an audio podcast with my friend about The Mandalorian, which I'm way behind getting up. So if you like some of the audio stuff I've done, that'll be coming up soon. But, talk about how The Mandalorian just kind of forges ahead and doesn't really do much planning. And it's just kind of funny that way. He just goes into a monster lair and, you could ambush it. You could find all kinds of tricks to get what you want without going into a costly heads-up battle. And yet he just goes in head first. Doesn't pay any of that strategery any mind. In this case, the text is saying the party may want to do that. And it makes sense, right? If you know where the Grunhelm's coming from and you know that it's obsessed with going to the town, doesn't it make sense to set up shop, wait for it to come back out, and then nail it instead of going into its home where it's going to have the advantage, where it knows everything? Not that it doesn't know about the lakeside, but still, you can set the parameters of the encounter as much as possible. That's the smart play. But the text here is saying, no, don't encourage the smart play. Have Siegfried come and in a way try to bribe them into taking the riskier path. So I don't, again, it's a one shot. So you figure they'll go for it. But I would totally get it. I think as a player, I might be like, yeah, let's ambush it and wait. I mean, there's another way to defeat that, which is that there's multiple entrances. Here you've found one, and maybe the Grunhelm comes out. You can make some checks and have some fun with it potentially spotting the ambush or not, and then it escapes, runs back, and then comes out somewhere else. That's another way to defeat this kind of strategy. But this is interesting because I think Siegfried coming up and basically bribing them to go in is going to feel like the hand of the GM. And I don't know if I love that aspect of it. So they can bribe him. Each one of those is worth about 250 gold just in its weight in metal. But it might be worth more as a gift from a headman type authority figure. And then if the PCs insist on setting a trap, the Grunhelm just doesn't show up. Wah, wah, wah. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure I love that approach. I would maybe have it that it just becomes clear there's multiple entrances. Though, of course, that has its own... You have to think it out a little bit, because if there are multiple entrances, maybe the party goes, well, we're not going to push in because maybe they'll escape. Or you think we have to wait, have them come out. If it's something that has to rest, we're thinking like vampire terms or some other supernatural creature, and they're active at night, then maybe we got to rush in during the day when they can't come out. Different things you do, but I probably wouldn't take that approach, but sure. Probably it will definitely work for some groups. Those who wish to swim into the cavern. Okay, so this seems to suggest then that the entrance is in the water, or at least partially. Must make a DC 10 athletics check to reach the entrance of the cavern, and then a DC 12 athletics check to swim through the twisting tunnel. Yeah, see, this is again where I don't know if I would put checks on it. I don't know what the checks are for. Maybe if you're wearing equipment, and if you're all armored up in your heavy armor, you're trying to swim, just swimming alone, I'd give you a check. But in this case, again, there's no... So far, they have not established that there is some kind of threat. There's no ticking clock. So what happens if they start failing checks? They're just going to keep rolling dice until they succeed. If we don't have any meaningful consequences to give them, I don't think anything here suggests that the Grunhelm is going to jump at them in that tunnel and that thing. So I might just let them swim, or again use the check for something else. Maybe they're going to make noise if they're trying to be quiet. Something of that nature. Let's see. If someone climbs to the top of the spire and dives in, as the Grunhelm did, they can ignore the first check, as their momentum will carry them down into the cavern mouth. So I guess it's underwater. See, yeah, see, I really could have. So I know you get to the top, you could look down and see it, but I didn't realize it meant it was underwater. I thought it was more that maybe the angle, you see things differently. But I guess the cavern is underwater, so you must swim out to it. So yes, this is definitely one where just for a little bit of extra clarity, maybe my brain's just not working quite yet this morning, but I feel like I could have used that. So okay, so there's a hole in, I guess, in the water, and I guess we're assuming that they know that they'll be able to get through that to the base of the spire, but it's kind of a hole. But I guess you really have to get it vertically. Yeah, I really would like to see it. There are regular pockets of air throughout the tunnel, which allow even PCs with low constitution scores to regularly catch their breath. This is good. The air in the pockets is dank and stagnant, but it is breathable. Additionally, the pockets appear to have been clawed out of the rock. Ooh. Make a DC 16 perception check or a DC 13 survival check. That will tell you that whatever clawed out these pockets, though, had much larger hands even than the Grundhelm. Bum, bum, bum. After some switchbacks, which are easier to navigate, they're going to come up into a 20-foot wide pool. So it seems you have to go into the water, kind of through a tunnel. It's going to lead up into the spire, I'm guessing. And I hope it would be nice if there's a map. Maybe there's a map. No map. Okay. With a 5-foot wide lip. The water is only a few feet deep in the pool, aside from the tunnel mouth at the center, and there is a door to the north. Ooh, we're getting our first non-Grundhelm monsters. 2 giant toads are waiting. They attack with surprise as soon as the party emerges from the water. The water does not impose disadvantage on attacks for medium-sized PCs, but it does for small-sized ones. All movement is halved as well, unless someone possesses a swim speed. So they're moving at half speed, but non-disadvantaged unless you're of small size and you get to fight 2 giant toads. I think here some formatting would probably be helpful, calling out the toads are here. That way, because when I think of it, I'm going to read this through, right? And if then I'm going to run this, I'd be using this as a reference. And yeah, I could highlight it, I guess, especially since I have it in a PDF, it doesn't do any everlasting harm to the book to highlight stuff. But this is where, hey, give me a little note. There's monsters here. That way I can really work it into my description. And they put the black text at the end rather than the beginning, which I would probably have that in the front of this and then get into the other thing if I am going to read this text. Because probably what happens, the way I would work is I would start looking through it and speaking about it. And by the time I get to the text I'm supposed to read, I've kind of already been calling out the description of things. So, but maybe it could be a formatting thing, but I would have probably tried to work to get that at the very first thing. Presumably through the door. Yeah, so once the giant slodes are slain, the giant toads. If somebody wants to stat me up a giant slode, though, maybe it's a part slod, part toad. I would love to have it. Hit it in the comments. Giant slode. Once the giant toads are taken care of, they can step outside the pool and explore the rest of the underground vault. Carved from solid bedrock with great skill, this place was clearly built to gigantic proportions. Along the first hallway just past the pool are 2 huge engravings. On the left wall is a picture of a titanic figure grappling with a dragon. The dragon's breath washes over the warrior even as he drives a spear deep into its gaping jaws. The opposite wall shows a scene of a great coffin being laid to rest, carried by a dozen figures. All those figures bear the skull helms like those worn by the Grundhelm. Judging from these engravings, the PCs have found Carthobal's tomb. Which is interesting because the stuff that was talked about for Carthobal I don't think it mentioned dragons. So it would have been nice to keep this imagery and repeat it in the stuff on the runes from the bow. And maybe even here we would see him with the bow facing off of the dragon to make that connection a little bit clearer. But I guess at this point as the GM, we could just tell the PC straight out this seems to be Carthobal's tomb. But maybe those clues could be linked together a bit more. 15 feet past the engravings is a poisoned dart trap. Ooh, nice. DC 15 perception check to notice a slightly raised flagstone and the subtle holes in the walls. The trap can be disabled by either ramming a spike like a python under the pressure plate or stuffing the tubes with wax, cloth, etc. to prevent them from firing. The pressure plate can be leapt over with a DC 10 acrobatics or athletic check. If no one notices the trap, it is triggered when more than 20 pounds of pressure steps onto the plate. It fires 4 poison darts that each deal 2 points of damage if they hit with a +8 on their attack. Anyone hit by these darts must make a DC 9 con save or take 5 points of damage. No more than one dart should target a single PC. In this instance, as the trap is meant to be spread out down the hall. Those who make a DC 12 nature check realize that this poison was likely much more potent in years gone by, but the fact that it's lasted this long and is still dangerous is a testament to how well thought of the warrior buried within was. Yeah, this is no dime store trap, y'all. This is some pure, premium, handcrafted, artisanal poison dart traps. This must have been a rich man. Past the initial etchings, there are several more halls depicting the life of Kar Thobal. He's shown rallying warriors around him, leading great battles, and ruling on disputes from a huge hilltop throne. Okay? So they can keep continuing. They're going to find some traps that have already sprung. Let's see. Okay, so as they keep going, they're going to hear a low, guttural voice singing to itself. If you can speak giant, anyone who speaks giant will recognize prayers, though the voice is not quite deep enough to come from the throat of an actual giantkin. So something that's not a giant, calling out prayers in giant, and it's a DC 14 stealth check if you want to make it up unawares, or make it up with whoever's singing being unaware. And again, they put the box text after the other stuff. I probably would have put that first. So if you fail in stealth, let's see. If the party failed to approach stealthily, append the following. Okay, so we get a little extra text that you make if you did not stealth. If you either didn't try or you failed. There's a hulking figure and it's going to leap to its feet, whirling towards you. A misshapen skull leaves one eye bulging, and a protruding jaw leaves the lower teeth bared like an animal's fangs. Wrinkles line his cheeks, and up close it's obvious that his tangled mane and beard are shot through with gray. He snatches the knife blade from his hip, bellowing a harsh cry. For some reason in my mind I thought of a sand people's little... I don't know, so it sounds more like a seal. Sorry about that. Okay, if you speak giant, you know the Grunhelm did not shout a war cry. so much for my sand people / seal. He's really saying, "Mother, outsiders, I'll protect you." If you make a DC 12 insight check, you realize the Grunhelm is afraid, but not for himself. So you don't need to speak giant to know that the Grunhelm is afraid, but not of you. All right, and then they're saying here the Grunhelm is fighting much more strategically than the previous battle. Oh, because he doesn't have the mask. So this would have been nice to know up front. But again, I might have skipped over it, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more to talk about the helm and talk about how the Grunhelm might fight a bit recklessly in the first fight because he's got the extra resistances from the helm. But in this case, it doesn't have the helm on. So now it's going to be taking an extra, I don't know, what is it, 5 points or whatever it is from not having those resistances rolling. Okay, and so either after 4 rounds or the Grunhelm is gone nighty-night, gone unconscious, hit 0. His mom shows up. And this is called The Blood Debt of the Troll's Bane. This time I'll read the black text. And here it is, properly, in my opinion, put at the front of this section. Stop! A voice roars from behind the curtain. A limp, shuffling sound fills the room, and a gnarled green hand curls round the curtain. Slowly it pulls the skin back, revealing a stoop-shouldered troll. Her eyes burn yellow in the dim light of the candles, and her long limbs are ropey with coiled muscles. She seems exhausted, though. Leaning against the wall, One leg is twisted beneath her, an old scar pulsing with pain and leaking ichor. Please, she says, the word dragged out of her. Do not hurt my son. So now we're definitely getting kind of Beowulf, Grendel, 13th Warrior vibes again. If the Grunhelm is still able to, he disengages from the fight and moves to protect his mother. And if they continue to fight, ignoring her, then he will rush to cover her retreat. And she'll give him his mask at this point, and he puts it on before getting back involved. And now the Grunhelm will fight to the death as his mother dives into another pool in her room, swimming away with uncanny speed. There are no air pockets in her route, and she leaves the air arena immediately. So this is one where the goal here is not to just jump back into combat. Something that can be hard. It's a tough impulse for players sometimes not to just think, okay, now we're just going into part 2 and just keep fighting. But it's a nice twist on it. She doesn't come in and join the party to join the fight to make it harder. I mean, she does only because she gives him his mask, which means he's going to have a bit more oomph afterwards. But there's an opportunity here for something. We don't know yet what it is. If they don't take it, they're going to potentially lose it. I don't know if it's just lost forever. She's just going to be gone or what. Well, we'll see. So if the PCs do as the troll requests and cease fighting, she admonishes her son to put up his sword. He does so, but never moves from her side as his wounds begin to slowly knit themselves closed. He lets her lean on him and eases her to a spot where she can rest her weight against the casket. The troll's name is Umbarta, and the Grunhelm's true name is Haratha. His parents had left him in the woods to die of exposure when he was a babe, and she had taken him and nursed him herself. While he would never be the true equal of one of the kins in size, strength, or his ability to heal from wounds, he was more than a match for any man. So now we get a little bit of his story. And I presume that she will tell us about her history, since now we get some history that we can feed the players if they ask, or maybe she will launch into her sad tale. She'd been one of only a handful of trolls living in these hills, a small community, largely keeping to themselves and trying to live simple lives. Then Halfgard had come north with his people, and he was a proud man, his head full of legends and glory, and he had thought to find the treasures of the old kings and to build a city on the honors of the long dead. Umbarta and her kin had watched from a distance, but had mostly ignored them. Men were dangerous, especially those both strong and foolhardy enough to press into the Northlands. It was Umbarta who drew their attention when she took the babe. His parents had left him in the wilderness far enough so they wouldn't hear his cries, but a shepherd had seen her take the child. The parents, too ashamed to admit they'd tried to kill their own son, claimed that Umbarta had stolen him from them. And that was all the pretense that Halfgard needed to begin his hunt. So there you go. So mistaken intentions, right? So she tries to do a good thing. It is mistaken as a bad thing. You have some very not nice humans who lie to cover up their own guilt, and then one who is just itching for any fight, who just uses it as an excuse to get the fight that he wants. A story of very modern sensibilities, right? Leaders who want to get what they want, and they're just playing the political game, and as soon as they get that opportunity, they spring at it. Other people who do shameful things and then continue to lie and deceive to cover up that, and then the people who get caught through no fault of their own, simply because they try to do a right thing, but it just happens to fall in exactly the spot to make them victims of these other forces at work. Let's see. Haratha had grown during the hunt, and though he was still little more than a boy in years, he towered over the townsfolk who'd given him up, and his rage at the deaths of his adopted family was more than a match for anything the Trollsbane could muster. When Halfgard brought a witch woman's poison and attacked Umbarta, that was the final nail in his coffin. Mother and son fled below to the tomb of their great ancestor Carthobal, and as she slept, Haratha took one of the ancient helms and a guardian's blade. He swam up to the lake and took his vengeance upon the Trollsbane. The fear they felt at his death tore the town apart, and soon after the remaining townsfolk left. So there we have it. Now we know the horrible truth of what happened at Kingsbridge. If the PCs ask whether there can be peace, Umberta says she does not think so. Men will fear what they do not understand, and what they fear they will try to slay. She's very wise, Umberta. She has seen it firsthand. The PCs have her word that neither she nor Haratha will harass Kingsbridge again. However, she believes that will not be enough. To save face and salve his pride, Siegfried will need their heads. So now we have another dilemma. And these are the kind of dilemmas I like. There are some clear solutions, right? So the PCs should go and say, hey, we talked to Umberta. She's not going to attack you guys anymore. You guys just don't attack her anymore. And we all live in harmony. Kumbaya. And we'll take our reward and leave now. But Umberta has hinted, and I think that most people would probably agree, at least given the human nature and certainly the kind of motives and motivations that we've seen in this adventure so far, that does it seem that Siegfried's likely to listen? We had hints before, and this is probably another reason why not to gate or make it easier to see the insanity that is maybe starting to bubble beneath the surface of Siegfried, that we've been given clues that he will probably not be receptive to this message, as Umberta warns. So what happens when the PCs go back? Do they go back at all? Do they slink away? Do they try to relocate Umberta? It doesn't say whether they will leave or not. Are they steadfast and wanting to maintain their home, or would they relocate somewhere? We don't know, but there's some tough choices. Might even feed into PC's alignments or their backstories or other things they have about themselves, how they feel. In any case, we assume that they return to Kingsbridge, and we have a little bit of text saying, how this adventure ends depends entirely on the choices the PCs made in the tomb. This is true. If they chose to fight Haratha to the death, they returned to Kingsbridge with the following ending. Okay, so here we get the conclusions. So the one ending is, I'll just read the boxed text. Obviously, final spoilers for the adventure. When you left Kingsbridge, it was a place trembling with fear. Now it is awash in blood and terror. Doorways are smashed, carts flipped onto their sides, and several houses are aflame. The doors to the longhouse stand open, and inside is a scene of carnage. Warriors lay in heaps, blood on their lips as they breathe through broken ribs. Others have been rent asunder, their bodies torn apart with such ferocity that their blood spattered the ceiling beams. 2 bodies lay slumped against the high seat. Siegfried on the bottom, his hands white-knuckled on his blade, even in death. Looming over him is the troll, her claws still hooked into his entrails. The smell of charred flesh is strong in the room, and it seems that someone set her aflame long enough for her to be killed, but not quickly enough to save Siegfried's life. So there we go, the violent ending. The ending where we go blood for blood, and as the PCs deal with Haratha, Umberta makes her way back to Kingsbridge and just goes to work. There might be the problem of, depending on how long the fight lasts, there might be an argument of how did she accomplish so much during maybe a few minutes, but maybe the other tunnel is much faster to get up and down. In any case, if the PCs choose violence, she also chooses violence, and we have a violent end for all. Now here's the ending if the PCs chose to listen and then they return peacefully. First, they need to decide how to handle Siegfried. If they choose honesty and tell him everything that happened, Siegfried goes cold. He tosses them the armbands in the dirt. "Pick it up and go," Siegfried says, shrugging out of his cloak and stalking toward the spire of rock. "Do not be here when I return. 2 heads may not be enough to slake my thirst." He's going to go. He's going to dive down. And he's never seen again. In one piece, at least. 3 days after his dive into Sapphire Lake, there was a late-night knock upon the longhouse door. It boomed through the empty expanse, but when the door was open, no one stood upon the threshold. Siegfried's sword, though, was hammered into one of the doors. Hanging from the hilt, tied by the hair like some grisly ornament, is his head. An unequivocal statement that even the bravest warrior was no match for the Grunhelm that dwelt beneath the frigid waters. Many fled that night, taking only what they could carry, and going as far south as their legs would take them. Others left with more dignity, but they still left. Within a fortnight, Kingsbridge was once again silent, given over to the hills and the things that dwelt with them. So, as the fear, you go back and you're honest, Siegfried's going to give in to his darkest desires, his madness, and just go after them anyway, and that will cause him his life. The town will be quickly deserted, but at least no more lives are lost. He loses his life, but the rest of the townsfolk at least are saved their slaughter. If the PCs are a little bit dishonest, maybe being a little shifty, giving him tantalizing bits of truth and mixing it in with some creative deceptions, he claps them on the shoulders, embracing them fiercely. They have his thanks. In addition to gold, he shall feast them as heroes. So basically, in this case, here they're suggesting they lie and say that they slew the Grunhelm in an underground chamber beneath the lake. But I guess they just kind of gloss over the fact that, well, why didn't you bring some proof of it? Of course, this is something that if your PCs are thinking ahead, maybe they could take some proof with them, right? They have those guardians, those helms. Maybe they could take something. Take a Nightblade, something to show. It would be a good thing to say, okay, we can't take the head, but maybe we could take something else. Can we give us something to show to Siegfried to convince him? It would have been nice to put that in there, but if your party's thinking, they could come up with that themselves. And then you get some feasting. And then it says, Hroth and his mother may never be seen by the people of Kingsbridge again, but the fear sown by the Grunhelm is already growing into a bitter crop. Some may stay at least for a while, but others will leave rather than trust that this place will ever be safe for them. And as they travel south, word will spread that Kingsbridge is still cursed, that a monster lurks in the mists from Sapphire Lake, and that not even the son of Halfgard Trollsbane could keep them safe from it. And that, I believe, is the end. Yep, so we have the open game license, and we're done. That is Critical Hits, The Curse of Sapphire Lake. My thoughts, again, as I always say for these, just from reading it, I think it's a nice adventure. I like that it seems to have a very Grendel, Beowulf, 13th Warrior feel to it. I dig that a lot. It's a fairly linear adventure, which is fine because you're running it as a one-shot, so you're not trying to open up some giant sandbox with all kinds of choices. But there are definitely spots at which points your choices will really matter. Particularly at the ending, how you deal with the troll and her adopted son obviously pretty much sets the tone for the entire thing, because some of the endings are sort of sad and brutal, and it will color everything that came before it, and the other ones are more hopeful, but still with a bit of a bittersweetness to it, because apparently even if you lie and say you killed it, people aren't going to believe you, and the place is still going to be considered cursed. So it's sort of a bittersweet ending. There's no maps in here, which I would say is maybe a mistake, because the part with the spire, maybe I'm the only one who would see it as being unclear, but it was not clear to me how exactly that worked. It obviously, as you read it and you go through it, you start to get enough of it where you can kind of say, okay, this is how it is, but I didn't quite get it, and it would have made it just a lot clearer. That and the longhouse, because we are doing a combat there, and even though I'm totally fine running at Theater of the Mind, it would have been nice to see it. I'm talking about squares lighting on fire and how you're turning off the squares, and there's no scale to really what that means. They don't say how big these squares are. Are we assuming 5-foot squares? Maybe it would be nice to have a little bit of the layout of the longhouse in the terms of where the Grunhelm will show up in that. So I think it could have used some of that artwork. And then there was some of the formatting. I didn't see a lot of errors or anything, but just that take an extra. I think if you they had taken an extra pass through here to really call out some things. Again, sometimes the read aloud text is at the end of a section instead of at the front. And I always find at the front, if I'm reading this, if I'm playing through it, if I'm running it as I'm reading it, I'm going to just start speaking as I'm reading. If I don't see the text, I'm just going to assume that I'm just meant to make the text, just make it myself. then I would get to the box text I was meant to read after I've already started my own descriptions, and so that's kind of a little out of place. I think that they could have used some bolding and maybe some icons, some things to really call out things that were important. So I think that there may be some details that aren't as clear or missing, that having some graphics, having some art, maybe, again, just ways of calling out things in the text as far as layout would have helped. But as far as an adventure, I think it's a good one. I think it has a mix of a little bit of exploration. Not a ton, right? That would maybe for saying which pillar does it strike the least. Exploration is probably the one that doesn't get touched on the most, because you don't need to find the town. You're going to arrive at the town. It's really obvious getting from the town to the lake. There's no exploration there. You don't need to find the lake. You really just have to know where that spire is. And it's so important that you know where that spire is, because that spire is where everything, right? Once you've gone through the attack portion and you're going to, okay, we've been attacked and now we need to find the creature before it attacks again. It's so important that you can't leave that to chance that they won't find it or they'll miss it. And there's nothing in the adventure to say what happens on subsequent nights if the party kind of dithers around and doesn't do it. So it's really super important that they get there. So I wouldn't really call that exploration. And then the dungeon delve, that part of it. So if there's really no wilderness exploration, there's not a lot of dungeon exploration either, because it's a linear path. You're going to go through the tunnels. You're going to come out into essentially a hallway that takes you exactly where you need to go for the adventure. So maybe exploration, they don't get so much of, but maybe for new players, that's good. Maybe they get to roll some dice, they get to use their skills, and it kind of falls forth. I do like that there's some social elements to it. I like the fact that if you're looking at what is the ideal way to finish this adventure, it's by not just attacking everything, but it's by taking those moments to step back and say, hey, there's other options here. Let's listen to what they have to say, kind of thing. I'm not sure how many parties will do that, but the option's there, and one that should be taken. I do question whether the Grunhelm might just drop in the first encounter, since it doesn't have really, that helm is the only thing that gives it an edge as far as not just getting its butt kicked by a united party. It doesn't have a lot of tricks. It is a solo monster. The only things it have is that it's in the mist, which is going to give a lot of things disadvantage. But if you literally run out there to face it, it has those resistances, but beyond that, it is prone to being dropped. So that is a potential that if I were running this, I would want to change. But I like it. It's a good first adventure. I think the big things is I really like the kind of Grendel, Beowulf, 13th Warrior vibe to it. I think it does a nice job at laying things out. I think it could just, I just feel like, hey, if you're going to give this a second, version 2.0, look at the layout, look at providing some. They give sort of a general map. They don't give a detailed map. Give maybe a couple more illustrations. Do some more, maybe play around with how it's formatted in the pages to give some things a little bit more importance. Call out some things. Kind of break up those paragraphs, because it is easy to miss things like I am if I'm kind of glancing through it. And particularly if I'm running a game, I'm not going to be able to just sit and read. I'm going to be reading and working with the group, looking down. It's very easy to mix stuff. Give me some bold, give me some bullets in different places, give me some different ways of boxing the text or presenting it to really call out what I need to know. And then just, maybe looking at the Grunhelm itself and making sure that it's survivable enough, or giving it just a one-time only kind of thing to get out of that first encounter. And I think other than that, there maybe some things are gated behind skill checks that I wouldn't. It's pretty easy to correct. I would rather, particularly for this kind of adventure, particularly with potentially new players, particularly with low-level characters, don't gate things behind a bunch of rolls, but maybe just have that you can get the basics down just by default, and then reveal more information or make things faster, or give them some other benefit if they make rolls, and then some consequences if they fail them. But that is The Curse of Sapphire Lake. You can find a link to it on Drive-Thru in the show notes. Thanks, Neil, again for sending it to me and allowing me to go through it. That's all I have for now. If I can keep it up, I'm going to try to keep streaming all week, since I seem to have the time. So look out for the streams. Hey, if you like this stuff, then please, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you dig it. I've got Patreon and Ko-Fi if you'd like to contribute in those ways. Those contributing by those does help me, because I do ask people for materials if they want to send them to me. I also will obviously buy some myself that I don't really need or use to go over the channel. So if you can contribute by giving me a little support in that way, it helps me to get stuff that I can get a hold of to cover and hopefully talk about that you find interesting. But however you go about, you got it for the rest of your day. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.